something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware.
Welcome to Occupy TV. My name is Michael Kerrigan. I'm here with Gene Stacy, and we're going to be talking about the downtown exclusion zone today. So Gene, welcome.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm glad to be here, particularly for an opportunity to talk about the downtown exclusion zone, which actually is called the Downtown Public Safety Zone, which I think is one of the first misleading things about this legislation that has been passed for the city of Eugene. Back in 2008, the city first decided, and they used then as the basis for the decision the fact that the jails were overcrowded. So there was no place to send folks who were in the downtown core zone. It's about a 22-block area in the downtown where most of the stores and businesses are located. And so they felt that they were having some chronic offenders and there was no way to get them out of town. So they passed a law that's extraordinarily complicated and is frequently called, therefore, the Downtown Confusion Zone.
So what's confusing about it?
Everything almost. It's very confusing about really who has what kind of authority in the first place. At first, an exclusion could be given just by a policeman. But when they extended it, they decided that really there needed to be more protection built in so that it couldn't be a power that was abused by the police. Because the offenses for which one can be excluded for 30 days to 1 year include such things as, for instance, leaning against a building while standing on the sidewalk. This can be construed as trespassing.
And someone can be excluded for that?
Yes, or sitting on a sidewalk even if you're not blocking traffic, or standing on a grate that goes over tree roots. So some of these things are really obviously not serious offenses. They're excuses to give a ticket to someone so that you can eventually force them to be excluded.
Sounds like harassment.
It does to me. And unfortunately, I do not believe that was the council's intention, but it is certainly what has happened. And because the law was so poorly written, it practically gave license to the policeman to do this. I've talked to one police officer who really feels that's his job, is to get people who are not good people out of the downtown. And of course, that's about as far away from the American way as we can get.
I guess so. So
I want to be totally fair. Some of these offenses for which one can be excluded are extremely serious. Having a weapon, or giving alcohol to a minor, or interfering with public transportation, or theft. A humorous one, though, for me, I'm certain it wasn't humorous to the two people who received it, was an attempted excluding two young men for theft of services because they had their cell phones plugged in to an electric outlet that didn't belong to them. Yes, very true. Just in the last few weeks, two friends of Occupy, whom we knew at the camp and have kept track of since, have received multiple citations, some for interfering with traffic, some with sitting on the sidewalk or leaning against the building. Now, some of these offenses, such as interfering with traffic, this particular citation doesn't make one able to be excluded. But what it does, it starts defining one as a habitual offender.
Oh, okay.
And this is one of the reasons when the law was rewritten in 2010, it was then the slant was changed and there was more of an admission that the purpose of the law was to get habitual offenders, not dangerous criminals, out of town.
And who defines, who those offenders are? It seems like
it's the police. The council also said this time, as I think I mentioned, that now the policeman can't do it on his own. He gives a show cause notice to the person who's accused of doing something wrong. And then that person has to show up at court on just the exclusion. When he shows up at court the first time, all he gets is an appointment to go to court for a hearing on the exclusion. At both of those appointments, the only person present is the policeman. So it's the policeman's word against the accused word.
So there's no attorney there?
No attorney is allowed. If you have the money to hire an attorney, which very few homeless people do, then of course you can hire one. But no attorney is provided for you. The serious thing about this aspect, Michael, is even though most of these things on the list of exclusions are pretty petty offenses for which you can be excluded, frequently, if you don't show up in court to contest your exclusion, which you may not know that you can do because you didn't receive this notice, then you may get excluded and you don't even know that you've been excluded.
So what could happen then?
Because it's being mailed to your home address and you're homeless. So what happens is you're not aware you've been excluded, you show up, and remember, which I did not mention, you've been excluded because you didn't show up in exclusion court. But under a whole different legal path, you have been charged with some type of offense for which you have to go through municipal court. Now, oftentimes, you are excluded before you get to trial. So when you're excluded, you're not found guilty of anything yet, because these are two parallel processes. The exclusion one is quite rapid. It takes place usually in less than about 17 days. But the trial on what you actually did wrong can take up to 60 days, so very easily.
So you can be excluded, you're not guilty, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And when no one has determined whether you're guilty. And in America, that's supposed to mean, if I remember correctly, that you're not guilty until you're proven guilty. But the exclusion zone makes you guilty before you've had a trial. And that's one of my most serious beefs with it. And then if you don't know you've been excluded and then you're just operating in good faith, going to your hearings about the trial, and you come back into town, you can be arrested immediately and put in jail because you broke the exclusion order that you didn't know you had.
Geez, that certainly sounds unfair to me.
Well, it's so amazing that it's happening here in Eugene. This is the last place I would expect something like this to be happening.
Yeah, we can do better in this community.
I would hope so. We've often done much better, and I think we can in the future. The serious thing when you said what's confusing is one, this two paths that one must follow. The fact that you can be guilty under the exclusion zone, not know it, and be sent to jail. Also, we've found the police are very confused. We've gotten different testimony from different policemen. I was in a meeting with one of the sergeants from town who, in fact, was brought to the meeting because he was the expert. And he was under the impression that once you're excluded by this judge, that exclusion is settled. It's over. You are excluded for 30 days or for a year. He was not aware that if you were eventually found innocent of the actual offense, that the exclusion was dropped.
Oh, so this is the main policeman who's enforcing this
he's
downtown.
The one who was brought to the meeting as the expert.
Jeez.
So it's not a good thing. I have been talking to a lot of the counselors, several of us have been. You've been in on a lot of those meetings. And I think what we're finding is so many of them weren't in favor of this law, but they didn't know what else to do.
Right, yeah.
Because the problems are legitimate. There are some real situations downtown where people who are hanging downtown are contributing to difficult situations, I will put it that way. There are two ways to look at how do you handle this?
Right. Yeah.
One is you create this little mini police state where people are denied their rights and cast out of the town. Or you can work with the folks that are involved, the folks who are living on the streets downtown. And you can also work with the merchants and the business people. These aren't bad people. They're just people who are very uncomfortable being around people who are very different than they are.
Right.
They look differently, they act differently, they have lots of time availability, and they're just hanging out, which is totally antithetical to the American work ethic.
Busy, busy, busy. We got to be.
Yeah, and everybody else is working. You know, so that's one of the issues. The fact that sometimes crime surrounds some of these individuals is undeniable. But in America, we don't say, well, you know, there was a bus driver the other day and he committed a crime. Therefore, we're going to harass all the bus drivers until they go away. That's not what we do in America. And that's basically what we're doing with the homeless who are in downtown. We're saying, you know, some homeless commit crimes. Therefore, we're going to try to get all of them out of the area.
So it's like the police are profiling the homeless.
That's the nasty word. It's a very nasty word, but unfortunately, I think we have to apply it in this situation. One of the things that the council did, Alan Zelenka had grave concerns about this program.
Yeah, I remember, yes.
But he could see that it was going to be voted in. So he used his vote in favor of it to leverage some protections. The first time it was passed, there was the protection of it would sunset in 18 months. It would go away. Because they said by then we'll have enough policemen downtown that we won't have all these problems. Right now we don't have enough police. So he put in that, this, in addition to the sunset, he said, I'm worried about this being abused. So he required that an advocacy program be developed, and the council budgeted $20,000. I think they were sincere in their effort to say, if you're going to try to go through this warren of legal paths, you need to at least have an advocate if you can't afford a lawyer.
Has this program come into play at all?
Well, it turns out that it's nothing more than an answering machine. The message on the answering machine doesn't even mention that it's an advocacy line. It mentions a lot of other things.
Doesn't sound real helpful.
Not. And of course, with an answering machine, what you have to do is leave your phone number.
Right.
And you're homeless, so you might not have a phone. If you don't have a home and you don't have a car and you don't have adequate funds, there's a strong possibility you don't have a phone. So you have no way to get a call back, which in effect hasn't been terribly bad because to date only one person has ever called and left a message.
That's it?
That's it. The only place that this program, this advocacy program that Alan got put in place, is advertised on this brochure. And this is supposed to be given out by the police at the same time they tell people that they are about to be excluded. But what we're finding from testimony from a lot of folks who've been given a show cause notice for exclusion is that they're not receiving this brochure. So they don't know that the advocacy program even exists. Again, that may not be too bad because the advocacy program has some limitations, one of which the advocate cannot advocate. All they can do is inform of the facts of what the opportunities to protest your exclusion or to appeal it. They cannot give any advice. They cannot even accompany you and sit next to you in the courtroom during your hearings. So it's really, you know, the best intentions have turned out to be nothing more of a sham, really, and a false hope that we are being humane and just and providing due process to people when we aren't.
Yeah, because advocates are supposed to be there speaking out for you.
Right.
That's
and
my...
they're supposed to advocate.
Right.
So it's a misnomer, it's an answering machine, and nobody knows about it. I would say, too, though, $20,000 was not spent on it because none of the agencies who were approached to manage this line felt that a true advocacy program could be done within that budget. And so finally the Human Rights organization has just said, oh, we'll put it on our answering machine. And they've trained people to handle it. They have a person assigned to it and a Spanish-speaking person assigned to it. But nobody's using it for all the reasons mentioned.
It sounds to me like the city has a responsibility to be proactive and go out and talk to the folks downtown and let them know about it.
One
Sounds like
would
that's
think
happening,
so.
yeah.
One would think so. The sunset law, or the sunset has been extended once already, and now the city is thinking about extending this again. I don't understand why they're even considering it. The police have provided absolutely no information that shows that harassing homeless people and poor people and teenagers and the mentally ill, those are the primary people who are targeted. How does that help make the downtown safe? It appears to many of us who've been watching this, it's not a safety issue. It's an aesthetic and a cultural issue. There is gross discrimination against people who look different, who act different. They're not, public urination may be unpleasant, and that's one of the things for which you can be excluded, but it's not a safety issue.
Right, right. It's a
Sitting on
quality
the
of life
sidewalk,
issue, right, or something.
you may think is slightly improper, but it's not a safety issue. They're not lined up blocking the sidewalk or a fire escape. They're sitting near the door of a store. So these are not safety issues. That's a total misnomer. And it's very hard for us, I think, to own up to the fact that it is cultural discrimination. It's a tough situation to find yourself being the perpetrator of, and not anything anybody wants to be talked to about. I think the merchants, if given a better solution, would jump on it. I think part of the better solution has already been provided. We've increased our police force from 2 people to 6 people already, and it's going to increase by 50% more in June.
I would think that would help take care of the problems.
I would think so. I know every time I go downtown, which is frequently, it's hard to go more than about 5 minutes without having eyesight of either a patrolman on foot or on bicycle.
Right.
And I compare, I live just a few blocks from the downtown, and I compare that to my neighborhood when in the 10 years that I've lived there sporadically when I'm in the country, I've never seen a foot policeman or I've never seen a bicycle policeman. And yet, if I were to believe the city fathers, the people they're chasing out are either hardened criminals or nuisances, unpleasant, difficult to be around people. And I find it hard to understand why they want to chase those people out of the most policed area in Eugene out into my little neighborhood where I'm sitting in my little alley in my little house all alone, and I have to go out and deal with these folks that they define, I don't define them, but they define as problematic. Why is that happening? Why is that okay? I think the residents should be infuriated.
Yeah, I know that I live and work in the Whitaker neighborhood, and that's what's happening for us. But instead of saying extend the exclusion zone, I think we should just roll up our sleeves, talk to folks, come up with solutions that work for all of us.
Well, like Calc, whom you represent, has done a wonderful thing. Under the St. Vincent's program, you're allowing, actually you've invited 2 people to put up tents in your backyard that are fully legal. St. Vincent's is providing you with bathroom out there and garbage service. So with no skin off your back, so to speak, you have provided 2 people or 2 families a safe place to sleep every night that's legal. And I think that's all most people are really looking for, is safe place to sleep. But all the statutes in Eugene prevent camping.
So is it legal to camp in Eugene? Is there,
My understanding is there are a few sites, those set up by St. Vincent's, where camping is legal.
right.
It is legal behind homes under certain restrictions, which involve being a certain distance, 5 feet from the fences, not visible from the street, and that you have garbage and bathrooms that are accessible. Those are the major requirements. So that is a possibility. But you know the countless parks we have, those that Occupy went to. And there's sites, there's bathroom services in many of them. It could be a safe escape for a lot of people. But we not only prohibit it, but the police are pretty abusive at times, slashing people's tents up, throwing them in the river. We've even fenced in under our bridges in many places so that the homeless can't sleep under the protection of the bridge canopy. Now they can sleep right outside, which is where they have to sleep in the rain and sleet and snow.
Jeez, yeah.
But not under cover. Now there's something wrong with that. There's a meanness to me in that, because frequently they'll let them sleep in the parks as long as they don't have a sleeping bag, there's no tent. We've even heard cases where if you are sleeping during the day on a park bench, and if you have a cover over you, that's considered sleeping equipment, and you can be ejected or even ticketed at the park. Now, the police will tell you they only do this in response to a complaint. And I feel in my heart that probably most police only do this when there's a complaint. But we know there are some police who do this to exercise power and to be abusive. So it's, again, when we leave too much latitude, when we give opportunity for abuse, it very frequently will happen. As you know, the city is having a hearing Tuesday night.
That's
on the 21st of February. And we're really encouraging...
Where's that going to be happening?
That's going to be at City Hall at 777 Pearl Street in the council chambers, where they always have the city council meetings. And we're really trying to encourage people to go to this, to, if they don't choose to speak, to at least be present with their bodies. I think to let something like this exclusion zone even exist in a community like ours is the beginning of undermining the moral fabric of our community.
Eugene can do better.
Eugene can do better. The task force that has been formed on the homeless has an opportunity to come up with some very concrete suggestions. As you know, because you've been a very active member of Occupy, as well as your own interest from Calc, there is an urgent need for these folks to go downtown. We have to ask ourselves, why are they downtown?
Yeah, I mean, what?
Where else is there to go? Many of the services are downtown. A surprising number of homeless people actually are students at Lane Community College downtown. Really? The library is downtown.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
The out of town, the Greyhound bus station is downtown, just on the edge of the zone. The library is downtown in the zone. The dining room, which gives free food to those in dire straits, is in the zone. So we have many resources downtown which attract people, but which are things they are in and out of. Now, if you're homeless, you have to carry everything you own on your back.
But there's no lockers for them to...
No, not even a locker. So when you get downtown, if you've left your campsite, come downtown, you could be carrying 40, 50, 60 pounds of stuff. You're not going to want to do a lot of walking around or leave the downtown while you're waiting for your next appointment. You've got your anchor, your ball and chain that you're dragging with you. So if we could provide a better alternative to folks, I think they'd use it.
I would think so.
There's the, not plan, but a dream of a downtown center, be it down towards the river or closer to the downtown zone. where we'd have a center where there are lockers for people to put their stuff while they're going to appointments. There'd be a place for them to cook, because the only food that many of them has is that they can get on food stamps. And the law about food stamps is that only food which is, I believe the word is raw. It can't be processed. It can't be cooked. It can't be something, it has to be something that you need to take another step to prepare. So this means that what you can buy with food stamps generally is not ready to eat. It has to be cooked. And again, if you're homeless, just taking out cooking equipment in a park is illegal, along with the sleeping stuff. Now, again,
what can they do?
What can they do? And who are we to deny people whom society has already pushed out of their homes, with all the foreclosures recently, out of their jobs? We're looking at, what, 18% unemployment, real unemployment in Oregon?
That's right.
And despite these circumstances, for which we're all to some extent responsible, we won't let them have very basic things like the ability to put a tent up or the ability to cook their food stamp purchased food. So this community center would allow them to cook. It would put a laundry machine or laundry equipment in. Just getting your bedroll dry if you've had to sleep without a tent, because a tent is much more conspicuous and is more likely to draw the attention of a neighbor who resents your being there or of a policeman. Just getting your bedroll dry for the next night is a major problem.
It sounds like a win-win for all concerned.
I would think so, but people haven't yet seen the light. And one of the things that I'm personally promising, and I think the ACLU and CALC and CDLC will all need to work together to work with both the folks who are homeless and with the folks who are trying to live in other ways downtown. And say, what programs, what can we do to support better alternatives, such as this community center? Because it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. This is a time where we have soaring populations of homeless and decreasing taxes. So all kinds of human services have been cut. Shelter care has lost 75% of its beds in the last few years. 75%. We just don't have the ability to take care of the problems that our society is generating. A lot of the people on the streets now are people that 6 months ago had been working steadily for 20 or 30 years. I ran into so many women almost my age who'd worked all their lives. And recently they'd either had a domestic breakup, or they had had health problems and had had to pay health bills, or they'd lost their job. And I would bet half of Eugene is 3 credit card payments away from being on the streets. If they lost their jobs, everybody is so indebted on credit cards, indebted on student loans, indebted on car loans, indebted on their mortgages, that if they can't make those things, those payments, they also are out. The most vulnerable are those who are renting. So a lot of us are kind of teetering on the possibility of being in the same situation.
It's not just those few, those other people, it's us.
Right, it is us. And increasingly, it's us who were working recently in Oregon. So we have to think of something. Or Eugene has done a terrific job through St. Vincent's of trying to provide permanent housing. With the volume that we're talking about now in Oregon, of over 8,000 homeless folks, we're not going to be creating permanent housing anytime soon. So we've been doing a lot of research at Occupy and looking at things like the tent encampments that are all over the country. Eugene had its own successful tent encampment
back in the mid-90s?
In the early 90s. That was quite successful. It was unanimously voted back in the second year by the city council. It was funded by the city council and Springfield and the county. they wouldn't have funded it 2 years in a row if it was the disaster that some people would have us believe that it was. It was right there at WISTEC, right outside Alston Stadium, and it was a highly successful program. It was eventually discontinued, not because it was bad or unmanageable, as the myth has it, but Whitebird and Shelter Care both withdrew because they said, we're not going to run this program because it needs to be year-round. It's only a 3-month program every year during the worst of the weather and when there are no football games. So if you'll make this a year-round program, we'll do it. But when we have to hire, recruit, train, and hire staff for a 3-month period, when the residents know they're going to be out on their ears in 3 months, that they can't ever get to that safe, secure feeling, too many problems evolve for it to be successful. But we think those problems would be eliminated by a year-round center.
Because I know at the Occupy campus, that uncertainty was creating that kind of low-level stress that for folks. So
and particularly during the closing days, it got very
low-level
difficult.
have some real stress for
Yes, for everybody, which was not totally unintentional on the part of the police. But the downtown is an ongoing way for Eugene, I think, to show its worst side. And I want to work with the merchants and businessmen to help them create the safety that they certainly deserve. We all deserve it when we go downside. But to do it in a way that doesn't put their interest on a higher plane than the basic rights of other people. It's not even just my interest against your interests. It's my interest against your rights. And that is not okay. So we're going to be working hard towards a downtown center for homeless people to go, again, to cook, to be able to visit with each other. Most of them are just visiting out there on the street.
Yeah, I know at the Occupy Eugene camp, the social thing was so important.
It's terribly important. Most of these people have lost their families, along with everything else they lost, and so they reform new families. That was one of what I regarded as a little miracle of Occupy, was the formation of the Street Family Alliance. Remember, we had all the young people
that was great.
who had been living on the streets, and we think we had around 75 to 80 of them living on site at almost any given moment.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and they were from all these families who on the streets have to be very territorial with each other. And it's a very antagonistic situation, and they band together and they are against each other. It's a very typical thing. A lot of people call those groups gangs. They call themselves frequently families because they've united together for the same reasons that families are together, which is mutual affection, protection, resourcing, etc. But now we have all these semi-warring families living in one square block in one camp with a lot of other people. And they spontaneously formed something they call the Street Family Alliance.
That's right.
Yeah, and they would sit out there on the corner. At one meeting, they said there were over 70 people present.
Wow.
Others, they sent delegates from the family. And they worked out the rules for themselves of what could and couldn't happen at the camp. And the trick was trying to work with them to find nonviolent means of enforcing those rules. And so it was really cool. A lot of these street kids
I remember that was
going to the de-escalation training and nonviolent communication.
I remember some of the meetings I had with the city. They were there too, talking to the mayor and the city administrators.
And making testimony at city council hearings. So we were seeing this incredible, it was really a little social laboratory out there. And unfortunately, the police and the media chose to pretend like the things that were occurring in our camp didn't occur other places. But our best friends, the people most supportive of the camp, were downtown merchants and business people and neighbors.
Well, why did they?
Because
that
all
about?
the people had left the downtown.
Oh, yeah.
They had something better to do. So they had gone to Washington, Jefferson to join us in the protest. And I think in talking to the downtowners, that lesson, because they were all totally aware of how much better it was in their minds downtown, that's the lesson. If you give people something better to do, they will go do it.
Like there's no youth center downtown now. Wouldn't that be great to
None.
have
And
that?
I know Portland, I understand, has one. I think Salem has one. And it's not something that's expensive. We can't look for solutions that are expensive. There's not going to be the will to commit what funds there are to expensive solutions. And so whether it's the task force on the city or those of us at Occupy, we're looking for inexpensive solutions. One of the things that excites me more than anything is that if we could just get a small amount of land where we could do a pilot project that would be similar to Occupy but more manageable because it would be more selected. You know, we were sometimes 300 people who had, most of us, never seen each other before. And with a lot of alienations between some of the homeless folks and some of the folks who weren't, as well as among Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, right. Kind of
there are all
stuff that
kinds of
happens.
things. So we have all these people trying to get together. But we've got people like Finn, whom you know, writing up these incredible plans to take some of the park areas or some unused city land and turn them into self-sustaining communities.
Isn't it happening in Seattle?
It's happening lots of places, all over Canada in particular, but we do have some here. And these wouldn't necessarily be tent cities, but these would be places where people could build very modest accommodations and community areas where they could grow their own food. You know, these are all people that at this time in our society are being denied the opportunity to be self-sufficient. A piece of land, not accompanied by money, could be turned into self-sufficiency.
People power.
Yes. And all we have to do basically is leave them alone. Not go out to say, well, it's better for you to live under a bush or down by the river than to live in this little tiny house you want to build that doesn't meet code.
Right, doesn't.
Under the bush is better, you know, than not meeting code. This is absurd. So we need the city to become more intelligent, really, in how it is approaching this problem and allow people who want to do for themselves to do it. We just need to get out of the way, take all of our fancy rules that are wonderful if you have a whole bunch of big, expensive homes next to each other and you're looking at a multi-million-dollar loss and people trapped in rooms that are disconnected from the front door. You need code. I have no problems with that. But if you're in a one-room house with windows on every side and a door, you do not need all these electrical protections.
Right.
You know, it's just absurd. So we need to get real. We need to get more humanistic. We need to get more empathetic. And we need to get more intelligent about getting out of these folks' way so that they can do what they want to do. Most homeless, when questioned, the most important things to them are their dignity and the ability to be self-sufficient.
So the task force, tell me a little more about that. I know there's a series of committees, but there's
It's
a bunch of people
a
involved.
bunch of people. I mean, we got great people. Unfortunately, most of them are very busy people.
Right.
So we're not having as good an attendance at the committee meetings and as at the task force as I would like. But those who are attending are extremely invigorated by the discussions that are taking place. What discourages everybody is the whole idea of where are we going to get the money for this?
Right.
And how are we going to get rules that we can be allowed to avoid in order to do these things as we were talking about before? The city's going to have to waive some of these code and zoning issues unless they want people hanging out downtown with nothing to do. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. It seems pretty clear to me. And the money thing, I know been a peace activist in my life. There's plenty of money for endless war.
Yes.
But what about bringing that money home? Creating
I
an
know.
inclusion zone in Eugene where everybody thrives, everybody, we roll up our sleeves, we make this a better community.
Right.
Having
Right.
more funds, we just, is really, you know, obviously it'd be a big help. But as I said before, people power, what you're talking about is a community coming together and making a difference. And I think you know, you're saying has me very excited that we can make the change.
I think we can, and I think people are more and more in the mood for it. If you drive around town already, at this time of the year in mid to late February, we're seeing more and more people starting community gardens. The stores say the interest is just phenomenal. And that's one thing of people who live in houses starting to be more self-sustaining. Eugene's always been a mecca for gardeners
Yes.
and vegetable growers, but even those of us who haven't done it in the past are starting to do it now. And I'm staying with a friend who lives out along Highway 99, for instance, right now. And she hasn't been growing vegetables before, but now she's totally invigorated about getting her vegetables in. She did it for the first time last year. And she's not just planting for herself. She wants to be able to feed a whole bunch of people.
It's great.
You know, and I think that's the spirit that has to reach people and that is reaching people. And it's the kind of spirit that we need to stop something like this
Right, yeah.
from developing in our fair city, where people who look like this make rules that people like this don't belong downtown.
Doesn't sound democratic to me.
It does
goes
not.
against the traditions of this
Exactly,
country. Not just the
exactly.
traditions, but the law, the Constitution.
I listened the other night to, when we went to the public forum at the city council, and there were some businessmen from Midtown there to speak.
Now, what's Midtown? Where is it?
Midtown is, as I understand it, just south of downtown. It's outside of the 22-block exclusion zone, for sure.
So on the other side of 11th, is that it?
I think so. And following on up Willamette.
Willamette, okay, yeah.
And their, of course, preoccupation was equal to mine, is why are you chasing the bad guys, if they're bad, out of the downtown into our area? Why did they get more privileges and protection, pseudo-protection in my mind, than we do? So they're not really opposed to the zone. They just want to be part of it.
Right, yeah.
You know, but I think with talk, I talked to one gentleman from the Midtown, and he was very interested in saying, well, what are the alternatives? I talked to one man who, at the beginning of our conversation, was not at all interested. He said, we just need to build more jails. And I said, have you read the paper lately? And he said, why? And I said, but we're shutting down right now, I think 130-something beds in the county. We can't even keep our jail beds. I think it's highly unlikely that we're going to get more jails. So if your plan is dependent on more jails, I'm afraid it's going to fail.
Yeah, he's
And
dreaming.
he said, well, more policemen. I said, well, you're going to have 9 in June. You know, that's a lot of
That is a
policemen,
lot.
a lot of money. I don't know what they budget for a policeman. I would gather at least $80,000. I mean, that's
Sounds right.
$750,000 to police a very small area. And again, I don't know the numbers. That's conjecture. But a downtown center for the people that are hanging out on the street to be able to hang out inside and have access to internet, cooking, you know, social service agency resources. That's a big step in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think the right step in this.
Yeah.
as well.
And finally he said, well, maybe we should get together and talk.
That's good.
And
yeah,
I thought,
it's hopeful.
hallelujah, you know. And in fairness, you know, we need to not only be talking to the businesses and the merchants, but we need to be talking to the few folks downtown who actually do cause problems.
Yes.
And say, do you understand what you're doing to your community? Do you understand that this is not affecting just you, but everybody else who has been forced to live like you're living? And let them, the things, again, you were at Washington Jefferson. I know no more generous, sharing people than the people who live on the streets.
Yeah, I learned that. I got to know some of that.
I've been in so many instances where people kind of covet their sandwich and don't want to share it, and everybody's supposed to bring their own and whatnot. But somebody walks into a group of homeless where everybody has a half plate of food is all they have in the first place, that person's going to wind up with plenty of food on their plate. Every person there will share. It's beautiful, and it's totally different. They're living in this survival mode, and instead of turning into an animal farm or other kind of antagonistic thing, they develop these units that are very protective, cohesive, and very sharing and loving. Frequently, they cross many age groups, certainly many former social groups, and they function quite well. So
how can we build on that? Sounds like
I think that we need, they're forming little civil societies. And if you think about it, they're not driving around toxic cars that are ruining the environment like I am.
Well, I did to get here, yeah.
They're not buying a whole bunch of stuff because they have no place to put it. So they're not contributing to all the landfill and other things. They're also not buying products that people in foreign countries put together for pennies a day and pay. You and I are contributing a lot more significantly to real environmental, kill the planet
than they, yeah.
type of things. If you want to go to real extremes, they're not even paying taxes to hire mercenaries to kill people overseas, and you are.
That's right. Oh, what a thought.
So if you really stop and think about it, how serious is sitting out on the sidewalk in the parking lot of Lazar's compared to what you and I do every day
I remember
in our society?
There was a homeless guy who, in the Whitaker neighborhood, I got to know. He was such a generous guy. He was just always had positive things to say. He was just wonderful to be around. He really contributed to the neighborhood. Unfortunately, he died on the streets. If we had a center, we had more to give this guy, he would still be contributing to the society. So it really helped me let go of some of the images I had of the unhoused, that, they're drug addicts or mental health problems. That, he was just one of the most generous, caring people. It was really a sad day when he passed. So.
And Michael, it's so important with so many people arriving daily on the streets. Daily. That those folks in particular who have not yet gotten disoriented from sleeping on the street, have not developed paranoia because of all the threats they have around them. Remember, you're not, even if you're paranoid, that doesn't mean somebody's not about to attack you.
That's right.
That haven't then developed PTSD from repeated attacks. That still have a sense of dignity and pride that hasn't been disrupted yet. We need, in particular, to get those folks who are so salvageable off the streets before they have all the problems. I promise you, if I were on the street and it were 11 o'clock and I was terrified of being mugged or killed, I would probably become an alcoholic or an addict to calm my mind. Think of all the people who live in houses that are perfectly safe, who take sleeping pills to go to sleep.
Right, or have a drink before going to sleep. Yeah.
We're all doing the same thing in our houses, but that's accepted. If you do it on the streets, it is not, and it's more likely. It's very easy for it to develop into a habit because you have no support systems for it not to happen. So we need to catch people before they go in that downward spiral. And I, honest to God, do not know of any solution for that type of situation. And the masses of people, think 4,000 to 8,000 people.
That many?
Yes, just in Oregon. Actually, there are more in Oregon.
More in Oregon.
Yeah, much. We're up near to 100,000 in Oregon. I'm talking about Lane County. Is estimated to have over 8,000 people living in their cars, under the bushes, under the bridges, when they're not blocked off, in the parks, out in the woods. There's huge campgrounds all over this county. But there's no garbage. There's no toilets. There's no police protection. There's only police kicking you out. So in all of these camps that were a big deal back during the Depression, and which are a big deal all over the United States. Now, what they're finding is if they can put some garbage, put some toilets, and use policemen to protect people, which is supposed to be their job,
Right, that's right.
instead of harass people, these camps do very, very well. Generally, if they're smaller in size, they're finding around 30 or 40 people is very good. Seattle has had 2 tent encampments for a number of years that are 100 people each. And they're extremely successful. They move every 3 months from one church lot to another church lot. There is a law that I believe is a federal law that churches can provide housing on their grounds as in a way of practicing freedom of a religion. So it's a little interesting loophole. And so the churches here could provide those same opportunities, allowing their bathrooms to be used or providing porta potties. I have a book that was published by a young man who lives here in Eugene that is a book on urban tent camping. And he studies instances. Portland has Dignity Village.
Yeah, I heard that's successful.
It is very successful. It has a very good rate of moving people into permanent housing. It has a group of about a third of the residents who are pretty permanent, but who stay there and manage it. They've moved from tents to very temporary type structures, and they've made it aesthetically quite fascinating, and they operate as a real community. The 2 tent cities up in Seattle are other prime examples, but there are examples all over the country. The worst problem they have is police and authority interrupting their sites, and they have to move so that they remain outlaws. When left alone, these camps tend to operate very well. And I think we can couple that with these new areas. If they're not a secret, if they don't have to remain hidden, they can have chickens. They can have farm animals. They can raise crops. They can burn fires to stay warm. They can develop power that's off-grid. They're kind of these survivalists that I see as operating kind of on the new frontier of the civil societies that so many people think are the next iteration of what needs to happen here in America.
So these
past
are
the age of
trendsetters.
Yeah, it's going to please everybody. People will be taken care of, which will please the Democrats. It's just that they'll be taken care of by each other. It'll please the Republicans because it'll be small government. We've about bankrupted government. So,
And the
so
libertarians will like
happy.
it too.
Libertarians will like it. I mean, a prime example is the medical tent, Occupy. Has operating under some incredible people like Terry Purvis.
Yeah, great folks.
They've just done this totally inspired by what they did spontaneously at the Occupy camp at Washington Jefferson, where all of a sudden they had 300 people coming off the streets, many of whom hadn't had medical care in years, and they had festering illnesses as well as recent injuries, and they just started going crazy helping people, and now they're opening every Sunday. They opened originally with one doctor and a couple of med techs like Terry, and now, I mean, they've got doctors, they've got a dentist who's offered to help, they've got nurses, they've got more of these first responder emergency medical folks like Terry who are volunteered, and each week their audience, their clientele have doubled. I mean, people do. If you provide a vehicle, as they have, then people do want to help. I remember that about myself before Occupy. You're so frustrated with everything.
Right.
But you just don't know where to go to effectively do something. And I think Occupy has provided that. And Occupy, along with the ACLU and CLDC, is taking the lead, and CALC, of course, is taking the lead in fighting this downtown development.
So we just have a few minutes left, about 3.5. What can people do?
People can go to the hearing, which is on Tuesday night, the 21st. They can write letters and email them to their counselors and to the mayor. They can tell the merchants downtown, you know, it's okay if the homeless are downtown. We're working on solutions to provide them something better.
Yes, very.
Right now, what they all need is our support. If we give them our support, if we're not their enemies,
That's right.
we have cooperation. And building on cooperative intent, we can get people to act in a way that is not detrimental to each other. We do not have to take away people's rights.
Doesn't have to be suits versus those with the backpacks.
It's not. It's not that kind of situation. And I don't feel the downtown businessmen, merchants, or neighbors want to use techniques like this. They just haven't known what else to do. And I think most of them have no clue at what harassment is going on. I think they would be absolutely appalled. David Mandelblatt, the head of the Downtown Neighborhood Association, has gotten very involved with working with the homeless youth at the dining room.
That's great.
And he has, and his wife and some of his...
Is that dining room across from Well Hall? Is that?
Yes, that's the one that provides the free food. And they've been getting to know the homeless. And he's going to provide, I think, a lot of leadership, because now he has a more intimate knowledge of the situation and is in a position to recommend good programs, good opportunities, a little tolerance on the part of everybody, the homeless as well as the owners downtown. And I think we can get this out of the way so everybody sees there's good faith. There's got to be good faith. The moral fabric has to be restored, and then we can build a better Eugene.
Sounds like just people coming together, looking at the best things we can do for this community.
No more, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it.
Looking at the best of all. So.
Finding the best in each other, building it, turning it into something concrete.
That just sounds like a great plan. I think Eugene's a wonderful community. We can do better. We can do more.
We can do this. We can do this.
So we just have about a minute left. So how about a positive, something you can tell folks, leave folks.
One of the things I'm most excited about right now is Ali Valkyrie and John Monroe and Derek and a bunch of folks, Big John, all folks from Occupy, have decided to occupy the Kesey Square, to reopen and reclaim the commons.
Ooh, that sounds great.
For the people of Eugene. And since they started their Friday afternoon celebrations down there, people playing checkers on tables that are against the law in Eugene, and sitting on the statue base in which Ken proudly sits. The food courts, which have been struggling for business, sold out. I mean, that little corner where Voodoo is.
There's a win-win.
It's an exciting place with music and young people and old people like me, and lots of activity. And it's just a tiny example of the revitalization we hope to see downtown. Not through laws, but through celebration of the commons.
Gene, I want to thank you for coming and talking to us today about the exclusion zone. It's given me hope. And
me too.
So I want to thank the viewers for coming and enjoying Occupy TV. We'll be coming back for more great shows in the weeks and months ahead. So thanks for tuning in.
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's